December 28, 1942. Lakunai Airfield, Rabaul, New Britain. Age for 5:43 hours. Rainwater glistened in the ruts of the coral runway as dawn bled slowly into the eastern sky. The jungle beyond the perimeter fence was still dark, a black wall of dripping leaves and tangled roots. But on the airfield, the day had already begun. Ground crews in faded blue overalls pushed a line of Mitsubishi A6M0s out of their sandbagged revetments, engines coughing once, twice, then settling into a smooth, high-pitched idle. The smell of aviation fuel, hot oil, and sea salt mixed into a familiar film that clung to the skin. Lieutenant Hajime Tanaka, Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service, pulled on his leather flying helmet and walked toward his fighter, boots crunching on crushed coral. He'd flown since China, fought over the Philippines, and hunted American bombers across the Solomons. The war, for him, was a series of missions, kills and cigarettes smoked on rain-slicked airstrips. Today, he carried something new, a story. He stopped under the shelter of a wing, where a small group of pilots smoked and shared rumors. "You've all heard about it now, haven't you?" Tanaka said, a faint grin tugging at his mouth. "The new American fighter, the one that looks like a child drew it." Ensign Mori snorted. "Ah, the twin-tailed crane. I heard a scout pilot saw one and laughed so hard he nearly stalled." Another pilot mimed two tails with his hands. "Two engines, two tails, one big target." They chuckled. Even the flight leader, Lieutenant Commander Sakaguchi, allowed himself a thin smile. "Reports say it is clumsy," Mori added. "Heavy. Too much fuel, too much metal. We will carve it up like a bomber." Tanaka flicked ash onto the wet ground. "Americans build everything overweight. Even their fighters look like flying warehouses." A mechanic trotted past, saluting quickly, and paused just long enough to add his own opinion. "If it has two engines, that means twice the chance to hit it now." More laughter. The Lockheed P-38. Lightning was still more rumor than reality at Rabaul. A strange silhouette spotted at long range, misidentified, joked about in ready rooms. The Zero had ruled the early Pacific skies. Their tactics were simple. Get close, turn tighter, fire first. Everything else, they believed, was just noise. Sakaguchi's voice cut through the chatter. "Enough. Briefing." They crowded into a low wooden hut, maps pinned to the walls, the air thick with sweat and tobacco. A staff officer tapped a stick against a chart of the Solomon Sea. "Enemy bombers sighted yesterday near Buna. Today we patrol here," he said, tracing an arc. "Expect P-40s, perhaps Wildcats. Maintain altitude advantage. Remember, short bursts conserve ammunition." No one mentioned the P-38 by name. It was a curiosity, not a threat. At least, that's what they believed. So 917 hours. 22,000 feet over the Solomon Sea. The world up here was thin and bright. Tanaka's breath fogged the inside of his canopy as he scanned the horizon, the Zero's engine humming smoothly at cruising power. Below, clouds formed a broken white floor, the ocean flashing intermittently between gaps. "Nothing yet." Mori's voice crackled over the radio. "Perhaps the Americans are sleeping." Tanaka lifted his goggles, squinting against the glare. Then he saw them. At first they were specks, tiny, shimmering dots above and to the northeast. But they were high. Too high for Wildcats, too fast to be bombers. He lowered his goggles. His stomach tightened. "Unknown aircraft, bearing 070, high," he snapped. As they grew larger, the shape resolved. A central pod, two long booms, twin tails like a forked spear. The laughter from Rabaul vanished from his mind. Two of the machines rolled gracefully into the sun's glare, lining up along a descending path. They weren't wallowing. They weren't slow. They were diving with predatory intent. Inside one of those cockpits, First Lieutenant James Jim Walker of the 39th Fighter Squadron checked his manifold pressure. "Turbos holding," he muttered. The two Allison V-1710 engines behind him were a steady, reassuring roar. His gloved fingers tightened around the yoke. The radio popped. "Lightning lead to all elements," came the calm voice of Captain Earl Johnson. "Targets in sight, zeros at our 1 o'clock, Angels 22. We stay high, we hit once, we climb. No turning contests with those bastards. Copy?" A chorus of Roger and Wilco. Walker let the P-38's nose drop a fraction more. Airspeed built quickly. 300, 320, 340. The white shapes of zeros grew, sun glinting off their rounded wings. He saw one of them twitch and roll, trying to break early. "Too late," he breathed. He squeezed the trigger. The Lightning's nose erupted. 4 50-caliber Brownings and a 20mm cannon spitting fire in a tight, converged stream. Tracers reached down like a fistful of lightning. Tanaka saw the flash too late. The zero ahead of him blossomed into debris, fuel and fabric igniting in a sudden orange flower. Pieces peppered his own canopy. "Bacayaro!" Mori shouted. "They dive like demons." Tanaka rolled hard, but the controls felt sluggish, not from the plane, but from his own fear. The P-38 that had made the kill didn't zoom away clumsily. It climbed, straight up, as if the air itself were a ladder. For the first time, Tanaka realized this was not a bloated bomber pretending to be a fighter. It was something else, something that had just reached into their sky and torn a hole in their confidence. February 7th, 1943. Fighter Strip 2, Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. 06:10 hours. Mud sucked at boots and tires as dawn crawled over the coconut palms. The airstrip was a scar of coral dust and pierced steel planking, flanked by sandbagged revetments and fuel drums stacked like rusty monuments. Mosquitoes whined, artillery rumbled faintly in the distance, and over it all came the rising chorus of engines warming up. 4 P-30 Lightnings sat nose out along the revetments, twin tails silhouetted against the gray-blue sky. Ground crews worked quickly, breath steaming in the morning chill. "Fill those wing tanks, Mac," a crew chief shouted. "We're going a long way today." First Lieutenant Jim Walker stood at the foot of his ladder, helmet under one arm, watching the fuel hose throb as high-octane gasoline flowed into the big fighter. The metal skin vibrated with the hum of idling engines up and down the strip. Captain Earl Johnson approached, maps and a folded clipboard tucked under his arm. "Briefing in the tent, Jim. This isn't just another patrol." Walker fell in beside him. "We hitting shipping again, sir?" Johnson's mouth barely moved. "No. We're escort today. B-24's going deep. The brass wants to see if these Lightnings can haul their weight all the way out and back." Inside the canvas briefing tent, the air was close and smelled of damp canvas, cigarette smoke, and sweat. A rough map of the Solomons and Bismarck Sea hung on the wall, covered in grease pencil arrows. The operations officer tapped the board. "Target area here, Kavieng. Our boys in the Liberators fly slow and straight. You don't. You're their shield. You've got the legs to go the distance. The P-40s don't. That's why you're here." A few pilots shifted uneasily. The P-38 had a reputation now. Fast, deadly, but also unforgiving. Lose an engine at the wrong time, mishandle the power, and the big twin could roll itself into the ocean. Johnson raised his voice. "You all know the rules. We are not here to prove we can outturn a zero. We cannot. We stay high. We keep our speed. We dive through. We climb back. Boom and zoom. We do not scissor with them. We do not dogfight for style points. Clear? A chorus of, "Yes, sir?" He looked each man in the eye. There's another thing. Intel says the Japanese still think we're slow, bloated, easier targets. They're wrong. Today we show them how wrong. 0832 hours. 24,000 feet over the Bismarck Sea. The formation stretched for miles. B-24 Liberators in tight, lumbering groups, their wings heavy with bombs, and above them, scattered slashes of silver where the P-38s rode shotgun. Walker sat in his cockpit, the world reduced to engine gauges, the shimmer of propeller discs, and the endless blue above the clouds. The Allisons throbbed like a heartbeat through the airframe. Frost crept along the corners of the canopy. Johnson's voice crackled in his headphones. Lightning led to all ships. Stay spread, don't bunch. Watch your high 12, they like to drop in from the sun. Walker scanned the sky, eyes darting, neck muscles tight. Then he saw them. Bandits, high 1 o'clock. Count 8, maybe 10. Looks like zeros. The Japanese fighters approached with confidence, little white crosses scribbling contrails behind them. In their cockpits, pilots like Hajime Tanaka tightened harnesses, expecting fat American bombers and clumsy escorts. Tanaka's flight leader barked over the radio. "We hit the big ones first. The small ones will try to climb with us. They cannot." Tanaka believed him. He had to. The Zeros rolled into their attack, angling to come in from above and ahead of the bombers. But the P-38s were already climbing. Walker pushed his throttles forward. The turbochargers screamed, a rising mechanical howl. The Lightning surged upward, heavier than the Zero but powered like a freight train. "To flight, with me," Johnson called. We cut them off. The distance closed fast. Walker saw the lead Zero flick its wings as the Japanese pilot registered the twin tails, the unexpected angle of attack. The formation wavered. "Jesus, they weren't expecting us up here," Walker muttered. Tanaka's eyes widened as silver shapes knifed up toward them from below instead of lumbering behind. The twin-boomed fighters weren't wallowing. They were climbing straight through the engagement like predators. "Break! Break!" someone shouted in Japanese. Too late. Walker's guns spat fire. Tracers carved through the thin-skinned Zero ahead and slightly above his nose. The Japanese fighter rolled, trailing smoke, then blew apart as Walker flashed past, the shockwave rattling his own cockpit. He pulled up into the sun, letting speed turn into altitude. 3 Zeros tried to follow, engines straining, but the gap widened inexorably. Down among the bombers, 2 P-38s dove like wolves, slashing at the flanks of the incoming Japanese attack. 1 Zero got through, raking a Liberator's wing with 20mm shells. But before it could loop for another pass, a Lightning slammed into its path from the side and shredded it with a point-blank burst. In the chaos, one thing became clear to everyone in the sky. The P-38 could be wherever it needed to be, high, fast, far from home, and still fight like hell when it got there. By the time the bombers turned for home, 2 Liberators trailed smoke, but they were still flying. At least 5 Zeros burned or sank into the sea below. Tanaka's surviving comrades limped away, fuel low, nerves frayed. In his cockpit, Walker exhaled slowly, sweat cooling on his back. "This thing," he whispered, tapping the Lightning's instrument panel, "was built for a war like this." He didn't know it yet, but across the Pacific, planners in darkened rooms were beginning to realize the same thing. And they were about to hand the P-38 the most audacious mission of the entire war. April 14th, 1943. Kukum Field, Guadalcanal. 2304 hours. The night was thick, black as spilled ink, humming with insects and the distant growl of surf crashing on the reef. Lanterns glowed dimly in the operations hut, their warm light casting long shadows across maps, compasses, and crumpled cigarette packs. Captain Earl Johnson leaned over the table, while Major John W. Mitchell hovered beside him. A handful of P-38 pilots crowded in close, boots muddy, faces drawn from fatigue and weeks of flying long-haul missions. A naval intelligence officer pushed a decoding slip across the map. "Gentlemen," he said softly, "we have intercepted Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's inspection itinerary. He will be airborne on the 18th. Time, place, altitude. Everything." The room went dead silent. Everyone knew the significance. Yamamoto wasn't just another officer. He was the architect of the entire Pacific War strategy, the man who had birthed Pearl Harbor, a living symbol of Japanese naval might. Mitchell's jaw tightened. "We're going after him." Johnson exhaled slowly. "That far inland? Over Bougainville? Even for lightnings?" The intel officer tapped the map again. "You're the only aircraft in the Pacific with the range to make it. No B-25, no P-40, no Corsair can do this. Only the P-38. The pilots glanced at one another. They already knew. The P-38's massive fuel capacity and efficient twin engines had opened a door no one else could walk through. Walker spoke quietly. "Sir, what's the route?" Mitchell pointed to a long, sweeping curve across the Solomon Sea. "We go feet wet at dawn. Single file, radio silence. We skim 50 feet above the ocean the whole way. 400 miles out, 400 back. No landmarks. If anyone drifts off course, they're gone." Johnson added, "And if anyone climbs too high, they show up on Japan's radar at Kahili. We have to arrive as ghosts." A young pilot in the back swallowed hard. "Sir, if we find him, what do we do?" Mitchell looked him dead in the eye. "You shoot him down." No one spoke after that. The mission was assassination, plain and simple. A one-way punch at the heart of Japan's war machine. But there was no hesitation. Not among these men. Not after Pearl Harbor. Not after countless friends shot down over jungle and sea. Johnson finally said, "You all get some sleep. Tomorrow we rehearse. The day after that, we hunt the unhuntable." April 18th, 943, 0702 hours, 200 feet above the Solomon Sea. The world was a sheet of liquid metal under the rising sun. The lightnings skimmed just above the waterline, props slicing spray into wisps of vapor. 8 P-38s flew in a single, impossibly tight line. No radio chatter, only the syncopated thunder of 16 engines beating as one. Walker's eyes stung from staring at the shimmering horizon. Sweat rolled down his spine despite the cool morning air. He checked his fuel gauge for the 100th time, a quarter down already. Ahead, Mitchell flew lead, his navigation timed down to the second. Every minute had been calculated with slide rules and celestial bearings. One mistake, and they would emerge into empty sky with no target and not enough fuel to get home. Walker's gloved hands flexed on the yoke as he skimmed lower, barely a wingspan above the ocean. At this height, even the slightest turbulence could slam the lightning into the sea. He forced his breathing slow. Don't drift. Don't climb. Stay locked in. Behind him, Johnson muttered to himself, "If we pull this off, hell, they'll never say the P-38 was a fat joke again." 7:49 hours. The tip of Bougainville. The jungle coastline appeared like a green wall rising from the sea. Mitchell held the formation low, following the curve of the island, still beneath radar. Every pilot's nerves were razor-sharp, ears filled with nothing but the roar of engines and the thud of their own heartbeat. Overhead, a flight of Japanese G-4M Betty bombers droned toward Balale airfield, carrying Yamamoto and his staff. Their escorts, A-6M-0s, flew lazy arcs, confident this deep inland was safe. No American fighter had ever reached this far. Not until today. Mitchell snapped his Lightning into a shallow climb, finally breaking radio silence. All flights, targets dead ahead. Go. Walker shoved his throttles forward. The P-38 surged, engines howling, wings vibrating with raw power. He shot above the tree line, branches whipping past beneath him. Then he saw them. 2 Betty bombers, sunlight flashing off their silver bellies, and a swarm of Zeros in loose, relaxed formation, completely unprepared. Walker felt a surge of adrenaline. Those poor bastards don't even know we're here. The Lightning formation split like a pair of twin blades. Johnson dove at the lead bomber. Mitchell's guns lit up the sky. Walker swung wide as a Zero clawed upward in a panic, trying to intercept. The Japanese pilot was fast, but too slow to meet the lighting surge. Walker rolled in behind him, squeezed the trigger. The Zero erupted into flame. In the chaos above, Johnson lined up the first Betty. He fired a long, brutal burst. Flames trailed from the bomber's starboard engine. It fell out of formation, descending in a wobbling arc toward the jungle canopy. Mitchell heard the confirmation. 1 bomber going down. The second Betty banked hard, trying to escape. Walker climbed after it, twin engines straining. The Lightning was heavier but faster, stronger, built to chase prey that thought distance was safety. He closed the gap. Inside the Betty's cockpit, Admiral Yamamoto sat with a stack of paperwork, unaware that history was speeding toward him on twin booms of American steel. Walker lined up his shot, held his breath, fired. His gun stitched through the Betty's fuselage. Smoke burst from the wing roots. The bomber rolled over, slowly, heavily, and plunged into the forest. "Second bomber down," Johnson shouted. Silence followed. It was done. In less than 90 seconds, the architect of Pearl Harbor had fallen. Not by a fleet, not by a battleship, not by a daring naval raid, by a handful of men flying a plane the enemy had once laughed at. Zodied 30 hours, southbound, feet wet over the Solomon Sea. Fuel was dangerously low. 2 Lightnings limped with damaged engines. 1 pilot radioed he was losing pressure and might have to ditch. The men were exhausted, their nerves frayed, hands shaking from adrenaline. But they were alive, and they had done the impossible. Johnson finally spoke over the radio, voice ragged. "Boys, let's go home." Walker sagged back in his seat. The P-38 engines droned like tired giants. He watched sunlight glitter across the ocean as the formation descended toward Guadalcanal. He thought of Yamamoto. He thought of the briefing tent. He thought of every joke the enemy had made, every laugh, every dismissal. Twin-tailed devil, flying barn door, heavy as a truck, not anymore. Today the Lightning had reached farther, struck harder, and returned home with victory etched into the Pacific. And the Japanese would never laugh at it again. April 18th, 1943. 10:02 hours, Kahili Airfield, Bougainville, Japanese sector. Black smoke rose above the palms. The first reports came from a frantic ground crewman sprinting across the tarmac, waving his arms as if chased by ghosts. Mechanics dropped their wrenches. Officers jerked their heads upward. On the southern horizon, 2 pillars of smoke curled above the jungle canopy, thin at first, then thickening into oily black clouds. One of the Zero pilots, Petty Officer Saburo Higeta, skidded to a halt beside his squadron commander, panting. "Captain," he shouted, "two G4M bombers have crashed inland. The escorts, half destroyed." Captain Masao Takahashi, a veteran of Rabaul and the Marshall Islands, narrowed his eyes. "Impossible. No American aircraft can reach this deep." Higeta shook his head violently. "Sir, the pilots say. They say it was the twin-tailed fighters." Takahashi froze. Twin-tailed. No Japanese aircraft had such a silhouette. No British one. Only one Allied plane carried that unmistakable mark. The Americans called it the Lightning. His pilots called it the Ni-Oni, the twin demon. Another officer ran up, breathless. "Sir, communications from the crash site. Survivors report. Admiral Yamamoto's aircraft has gone down." The entire airfield seemed to stop breathing. Mechanics froze with fuel hoses in their hands. Pilots stared in horrified silence. Even the tropical wind seemed to go still. Takahashi's voice trembled despite his rigid posture. "Yamamoto is dead?" No one answered. They didn't have to. In the distance, smoke twisted higher, carried upward on jungle heat like a funeral banner. Takahashi's jaw clenched so hard the muscles twitched. His voice came out low and broken. How did American fighters reach this deep? Past our patrol routes, past radar? No one knew, but they all understood one terrible truth. Their greatest protection, distance, had just been annihilated. 11:14 hours. Guadalcanal, Kukum Field. The Lightnings limped in one by one, tires screeching against the metal mat runway. Ground crews ran beside them, shouting fuel readings, checking landing gear, pointing emergency crews toward the worst damaged aircraft. Walker's Lightning shuddered as it touched down, one engine coughing smoke. He wrestled the yoke, praying the wheels wouldn't shear off. The aircraft slid sideways, tires screaming, before finally coming to a stop. He sagged forward, heart pounding. The canopy popped open and cool air rushed in. Crew Chief Sergeant Tommy Brooks scrambled up the ladder. "Jesus, Walker, you look like hell." Walker managed to grin. "Feel like it, too." Brooks leaned in, lowering his voice. "You boys did it, didn't you? The whole damn camp's buzzing." Walker didn't answer. He didn't need to. The way men looked at them, like they had returned from Olympus with lightning in their fists, was answer enough. Mitchell's aircraft rolled to a stop next. He climbed out, face pale from exhaustion. Major Davis ran across the tarmac, breathless. "John, tell me it's confirmed." Mitchell wiped sweat from his brow. 2 Bettys down. One matched Yamamoto's flight plan exactly. He didn't walk away. Davis closed his eyes, shoulders sagging as if releasing years of tension. "God help us, you really pulled it off." Mitchell nodded, voice raw. "The boys did." Behind them, mechanics already swarmed the Lightnings, checking bullet holes, refilling fuel, wiping cracked glass with oil-blackened rags. Engines ticked as they cooled, metal groaning like tired war horses. To the men on the ground, these aircraft looked different, like weapons of divine punishment, like avengers from the clouds. The P-38 had always been impressive, but today it was legendary. 14:02 hours. Rabaul Naval Headquarters, Japanese High Command. The messenger trembled as he knelt. Admiral Ugaki read the decoded transmission again, hands shaking uncontrollably. It was impossible. It had to be wrong. But the radio operators had triple verified the distress signals. Local commanders had confirmed the wreck. Admiral Yamamoto was dead. A room full of officers, men who had clawed their way up through decades of naval tradition, sat in stunned paralysis. No one spoke. No one moved. Ugaki's voice cracked. What aircraft carried out the attack? The intelligence officer swallowed hard. American P-38 Lightnings, sir. A murmur rippled across the room. That ungainly, two-tailed monster. The clumsy American giant. The joke of the Pacific. Mocked relentlessly by pilots who prided themselves on elegant, single-engined fighters. But now? Now the joke had crossed 700 miles of open ocean, had flown lower than any bomber crew expected, had evaded all detection, had ambushed an admiral who believed himself untouchable. Ugaki slammed his fist onto the table. How did those aircraft reach Bougainville? How? No one had an answer. Because the truth was unthinkable. The range of the P-38 was not a tactical advantage. It was a strategic nightmare, a weapon that rewrote the map itself. April 19th, 1943. 06:31 hours. Kukum Field, debriefing hut. The morning sun lit the debriefing hut in golden stripes. Mitchell, Walker, Johnson, and the others sat in a row. Uniforms still soaked with oil and sweat. Officers crowded the room, naval, army, intelligence, even war correspondents. Colonel Merrill, visiting from HQ, leaned forward. Gentlemen, I want to hear it from your own mouths. How did the P-38 handle at extreme range? How did the intercept line up? Any malfunctions? Any fuel starvation? Walker spoke first. She held together, sir. Both engines ran like sewing machines. Climbed when we asked. Dove like a meteor. The Zeros tried, but they couldn't touch us. Major Davis raised an eyebrow. Couldn't or didn't. Walker shook his head. Sir, they did. They tried. But climbing to intercept cost them time. The lightning was already there. Johnson added. They underestimated her. They thought we were too big, too heavy, too slow to turn. They thought wrong. Mitchell's voice was quiet but firm. They won't underestimate us again. Colonel Merrill nodded slowly. Good. Then he leaned back, speaking not to the pilots, but to everyone in the hut. Today wasn't just a mission, it was a message. The Japanese thought the Pacific was too big, that we couldn't reach their leaders, their airfields, their sanctuaries. He gestured toward the P-38s, gleaming on the runway outside. Now they know better. In the months that followed. Across the Pacific, Japanese pilots who once scoffed at the lightning silhouette felt a new chill whenever they spotted those twin booms. They whispered the same phrase in briefing rooms, on carrier decks, and in jungle hideouts. The Americans can strike anywhere. The P-38 went on to dominate the Solomon Islands campaign, escort bombers all the way to Rabaul, chase Japanese fighters from New Guinea to the Marianas, and rip apart formations that once roamed with impunity. Mockery died on April 18th, replaced by fear, by respect, by the realization that the Pacific now belonged to an aircraft they once dismissed as ridiculous. Twin-tailed, long-legged, cold, silver, unstoppable. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning.